Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm Molly. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 15th, 2005. Sorry. I didn't mean for that to be like a pause and clap period, but James said I could move the microphone, so I moved it. And my home group is the Into Action Group. We meet in Jefferson, Louisiana, close to New Orleans, in the greater New Orleans area. Mondays at 7:30, we're closed book study. We do the Big Book and the 12 and 12. So if you're ever in the New Orleans area, come out and see us. And I'm a little nervous. This is my first time speaking at a convention. Everybody can hear me. Am I too loud? I'm really loud. So I've never spoke at a convention before. I've spoke many times. I have not spoke actually recently, but I'll do the best I can. So start out with how it started. I did not come from, I'm checking the time. I did not come from an alcoholic family, unlike a lot of people in AA. Not everyone, but there was not drinking in my house. I did not grow up in New Orleans, so it was not in my baby bottle. I am from the South. I was born and raised in Nashville, and then I lived in California for a while, and then I grew up around New Orleans because my mom's side of the family is from New Orleans, so as a kid I got to go to Mardi Gras and do all that fun stuff, but I didn't live in New Orleans until 2004, and I'll tell you all about that. But I'm an identical twin, so, my sister, so I always had somebody with, I always had a friend, I always had my sister, and I guess we weren't competitive. I hear a lot of people that are twins say that they were like very competitive. We weren't super competitive. We might have been a little competitive, like when it came to grades and stuff, but we weren't very competitive. But we were constantly like trying to, like we couldn't stay apart from each other, but we were constantly trying to get away from each other, like trying to, define ourselves outside of each other. I want my own set of friends. I want my own things. Lane, you can't be friends with my friends. So I guess even from that age, I was struggling to like figure out who I was and like, find an identity for myself, which I struggled with, my whole life. And I did not find until I got sober. But I didn't start drinking really early, like a lot of people I know that started drinking around 11 or 12. I didn't start drinking until I was 17. But I started acting out when I was about 13. So I grew up in Nashville, and then my mother moved me to California, and I went to this really like sheltered middle school in California. And then I moved back and went to this the second largest high school in the state of Tennessee for high school, and it was horrible. That was my first experience trying to like fit in socially. And when I was in middle school, I knew something was different about me. I knew that, that I could see this like social structure forming around me, and I was not a part of it. And I realized that I was an outsider and that I was like the weird girl. And it didn't really bother me. I was very like, I was a very like creative kid, and my sister and I were kind of like leaders, and we would always like make up games on the playground, and everyone would play. And I guess in middle school, you still have enough of being a kid to like allow yourself to be yourself, even when that social stuff is starting to happen. But that's when I knew that I was a little bit different from everyone else, but it didn't bother me. I guess that's, it didn't bother me. I felt okay. But when I went to high school, I really thought for a long, long time that my problem in life was that I cared too much what other people thought of me. I thought that for a long time. And I mean, I guess that is a problem, but that obviously wasn't my main problem. But I developed really late. So not only did I develop late, like physically, but so I looked really young. But I also, like, just didn't, the social stuff just didn't come to me. I acted, I was myself, my normal, weird, quirky self, and, I didn't pick up on those social cues that were like, to not do that, and so people thought I was weird. And of course, when I got to high school, I hated it, and it was this huge school, and I got made fun of in middle school too, but I wasn't tormented. I wouldn't say that I was like bullied, but I was messed with a little bit, and that affected me. It really affected me, and from the, when I started school a little early. I started kindergarten when I was 4. My birthday's in late September, so I turned 5 shortly after, but I was also a little bit younger than everyone. So I started college when I was like 17, about to be 18. So I don't know, I guess I was 13 when I started high school. I don't know, I was young. And I would compare myself to other people, and like my sister obviously looked just like me. And yet she did not seem to be as affected by the fact that she didn't fit in, or that I really thought that, like, if I just looked older, that I would fit in. And then sometimes I would see these younger kids, these other kids come in that looked really young, that hadn't hit puberty yet either, and they seemed to be doing just fine. And so I didn't know what my problem was, and I would eat my lunches in the bathroom by myself. And I started acting out, and I started, doing some unhealthy behaviors, but I did not drink. I did not discover alcohol yet. And I think that's part of the reason why. I started drinking when I was 17, and I got sober when I was 19. So it really took 2 years for me, and that was all it took to go absolutely straight down to the bottom. And I believe part of the reason for that is because I started, I believe, acting out alcoholically when I was about 12 or 13, and I just hadn't discovered alcohol yet. So by the time I did discover alcohol, it was on. It was just absolutely complete. I was self-destructive before I ever picked up a drink. So naturally, once those substances were there, it was absolute pure destruction. So by the time I was about a junior and a senior, by the time I was about a junior in high school, I convinced myself that the way to deal with the fact that I couldn't handle being around my peers was to just pretend that I didn't care. And so I convinced because remember, I thought that my problem was that I cared too much what other people thought, which of course I did. I did not know, and I later found out, that my problem was that I was absolutely consumed with myself and self-pity, and that I absolutely need to be loved by every single person. And when you go through life thinking that you have to be, needing to just be loved and accepted by every single person, you're going to run into problems, because that doesn't happen. Of course not in high school, but never does that happen to anyone. It may look like that. Of course, it looked like that to me, for everybody but me, of course, because poor me. So when I was, 16 and 17, I started dressing real differently, and I've always had a thing about clothes. I like clothes. So, I was just like, I'm going to dress. No one's going to let me think, no one's going to make me think I can't dress exactly how I want to dress. And I'm still kind of creative when it comes to clothes, but so I just, I did what I wanted to do, and I was kind of an emo kid, and I dressed real crazy and listened to fun music, and I was real, like, tragic and destined to die young. I really believed that for a while. But I discovered alcohol when I was 17, and just like Holly said in her story, I never drank normally. I did not have that period where I could have stopped. I never drank normally. And I really, for a long time, I didn't think that I was as much of an alcoholic as other people, because I never really tried to stop. And in the book and in Bill's story, there's, story after story about how hard they tried to stop before they got sober. And it took me a long time to realize that I had tried to moderate my drinking. I had tried to control it. When I got sober, I didn't believe that. I did not think I ever tried to stop. I didn't think I ever wanted to stop. I did not think I was an alcoholic. I absolutely did not think I was an alcoholic. But I started drinking when I was 17, and similar to what Holly said, I was a sloppy drunk. I did not drink every day, and I didn't even drink necessarily every week. But when I drank, I absolutely had no control. The minute I put that alcohol in my sister told me this, because my sister would, like, take care of me when I was drinking, and because she was worried about me. And she said that I would go to the party, because I would, like, generally, like, not even make it to the party, but I would go to the party, And she said I would like go off somewhere for a half an hour and then she would like find me on the floor. And that is exactly how I drank. I mean, I drank as much liquor as I could get in my body, like as fast as possible. And I drank mostly vodka. I tried to drink beer a couple times and it was like too much, too long, I couldn't get it down. So I drank vodka, and everyone else would be playing, you know, once I started college, everyone else would be playing their little drinking games with beer, and I'd be playing it with vodka. So naturally, I didn't make it too late to the part, you know, too much. And I was that person that would like throw up in your car and on your shoes, and they'd have to carry me home and put me in the shower. I mean, I was a sloppy, disgusting drunk. So I figured out pretty quickly that I had to do other things besides drinking. And I discovered drugs pretty early on. But my first experience with drugs, I really thought it was going to be like alcohol because I had only that to compare it to. So I thought, you know, I guess I thought it was going to be like that. And it isn't. And it wasn't. And so I thought, oh, good, you know, here's something that like, I can do this all the time, because I couldn't drink all the time. Like and I didn't know that I thought that consciously, but somewhere in my brain, I knew that I couldn't drink successfully, ever. I could not drink. I didn't drink and drive, really. I got caught drinking and driving once when I was 17. I got taken to juvie, and luckily I did not get a DUI. They gave me like community service, and they really let me off. And I really never drove drunk after that. I did not try to go to work. And I didn't try to drink when I was at work or anything, because the way I drank, I couldn't walk, much less try to maintain a job or like drive. So, and it didn't occur to me that there was another way of drinking. It never occurred to me that that was abnormal. It never occurred to me that I didn't have to drink like that. And there was only really one experience. That's the other thing that I thought that I really couldn't relate to when I first got sober, was where it talks about going out to have one drink and then beating on the bar again saying, how did it happen? You know, that really wasn't my experience. I sought to get drunk every time I drank, almost every time I drank. Now, there was a couple times, and I didn't realize this till I'd been sober a couple years, that, you know, like I'd be at the cool parents' house, and they'd give everyone a beer, and I didn't drink beer, so they'd give me a glass of wine, and wouldn't you know it, I'd end up drunk. And then I wouldn't make it to the party, you know, my boyfriend was mad at me, and you know, all that kind of drama, and I didn't realize, you know, so that I didn't realize that I was drinking against my own will. I really did not realize that, or that it was abnormal to drink so, you know, to be such a hard drinker when I drank. I wasn't a hard drinker, but when I drank, I absolutely just to the wall drank, or like as Holly said, or like it says in the book, was more or less always insanely drunk. Anyway, so I discovered drugs, and I did a lot of drugs. I believe that my first and foremost problem is alcoholism, but I did do a lot of drugs, and it seemed like that was the main problem. Of course, before that and before the alcohol, there was these other things that I did. I had a lot of outside issues. Y'all think it's bad enough that you got to deal with the person that comes in the room and is like, and a drug addict? I was and a this, and a that, and a that. I mean, like, I had like 5 things. And I believed all those things to be true, and I also believed that I was worse than you, and you could never know. You know, like, poor me, tragic. Anyway. So, you know, I discovered, and of course everyone, like, you know, parents and stuff, it's like, my parents didn't like me drinking. My mom, and I was telling Amy this, my mom caught me smoking cigarettes when I was 17 years old. Like, less than a year, I could smoke legally, and flipped out. So I was not allowed to drink, and I certainly wasn't allowed to smoke cigarettes, and I certainly was not allowed to do drugs. But I had this full scholarship to Western Kentucky University, which is about an hour away from Nashville, and I lasted a semester and a half there. And I graduated, you know, I was on track I ended up graduating pretty good in high school, but I failed one of my final exams. And I was the one, and I was never like good at many things. Like, I didn't do sports. I could draw. But I was good at school. That was like my thing. Like, I can study, I can read, you know, I can make straight A's. And I did. And so, you know, in high school, grades were very, very important to me. And I failed one of my final exams. I almost didn't graduate from high school. Of course, my dad worked at my school. So my dad's my whole family is teachers. And so I got to retake that exam, and I don't even know what I ended up with in the class, but anyway, so I have this full scholarship. I go to college, and and I'm still having these consequences. I'm still getting in trouble. My poor sister is like running around, waking me up for exams and stuff like that, and I almost lost my I managed to make like straight, like with the scholarship that I had, I was like in advanced classes, and I had to get like at least a 3.0 average, and I managed to get like all B's my first semester. In the second semester, I would have failed. I got medical leave. I got medical leave and I came to New Orleans, so that's what happened. My mom was living in New Orleans at the time, but she had moved back home, and so she took me to New Orleans to get sober. And New Orleans is a great place to drink. New Orleans is a great place to get sober. There is amazing Alcoholics Anonymous in my city. So, I have all these consequences, and I come home to my mom, and I go to outpatient treatment, and I made friends there. I made drug buddies, I made drinking buddies in treatment. I did not want to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I did not want to go to Narcotics Anonymous. I did not think I was an alcoholic. Absolutely did not deny it, was not an alcoholic. And I thought that maybe I had a problem with this one particular drug. And of course I had all these other problems too. That was, probably I had been in therapy, since my parents got divorced when I was like 8 years old, or younger than that, 6 years old, I don't know. On and off, of course. And on medication and all that stuff. So I had all these other like mental health problems. And anyway, so I went, they told me to go to meetings. And I didn't want to go to meetings, but I thought, okay, I'll go to an NA meeting. And I went to an NA meeting, and their steps are very similar to ours, and it said God on the wall. And I said, this is not for me. This is not for me. And of course, I think I went to one meeting the entire time I was in that outpatient treatment center. And so naturally, I didn't even try to stay sober. I did not even try. It did not even occur to me to do that. And I kept getting in trouble. In every consequence that I had, everything that happened, it got worse and worse. But I always thought it wasn't a big deal. In fact, that was like my catchphrase, Mom, it's not a big deal. And I really believed that. I really, that ability that we have to rationalize everything that happens to us and every part of our behavior. I don't know, that's pretty, unique to alcoholics or unique, I don't know. But that amazing ability to rationalize my own behavior in the face of horrible consequences, I had that. And so I really believed that it wasn't a big deal. I truly believed that, when I got committed to the psych ward, it was just a misunderstanding, and I did not, that was my mom's fault. My poor mother. What happened was she told me she was taking me, she was going to commit me, and I know today, and I was telling Amy this too, that what happened next, I thought I did out of anger towards my mother, and I did, but I know now that it was out of pride, because I wasn't going to go to the psych ward without a reason. Even then, even at my lowest, like one of my lowest points, that ego was still there. That concern about what everybody else thought, Of course, everyone in the psych ward, they're going to judge me, I don't know. So she told me she was committing me, so I went upstairs to the bathroom and took 3 bottles of pills, and I said, okay, now I can go. And it's funny now, but I could have really done a lot of damage to myself and my poor mother. So I got committed for a few days, and that was scary. That was scary. I never went to jail, but, I knew I didn't belong there. They had some real, But I do remember coming face to face with the idea that, like, you could be in and out of institutions for the rest of your life if you don't stop behaving like this. And you aren't like those people that need to be institutionalized for the rest of their life. Because I wasn't. There were some people in there like me that, that made some bad decisions or had drug problems, had alcohol problems. And then there were people that were, that had some serious mental health problems that, that could not lead a normal life. Homeless people and stuff like that. It was really sad. But I made friends in the psych ward, and I got out, and I let one of those guys come pick me up and take me, like, I don't know where we went, like an hour away to Baton Rouge in the middle of the night, and that was my first experience with one particular kind of drug. And I think about that, and I had no I mean, who makes friends in the psych ward? And then, like, I don't even remember this guy's name. And yet, I let him come pick me up, told him where I lived, and we went to his cousin's house and did a bunch of drugs, and he dropped me off the next day. At the time, I was living with my uncle because my parents didn't know what to do with me. My family, like, kind of tossed me around, like, passed me around because nobody knew what to do with me. And I came back at, like, 5 in the morning, and I said, oh, I took a walk. I couldn't sleep. I took a walk. You know, and they were drug testing me, and I failed every single one. And it just always, you know, my behavior did not seem, you know, abnormal. And I really believed that, like, my mother was the root of, like, my problems, you know. My mom was just, like, on my ass all the time, and, like, she just needed to leave me alone. If they would just leave me alone and let me do my thing, that, you know, everything would work out, you know. And circumstances just weren't working out right now, but that was just circumstances. It never occurred to me that I couldn't stop on my own. Now, during this time, when I was living with my uncle, I met this guy, and this guy was into heroin. And so I knew I had to be really careful. And I remember trying different things. Now, I wasn't serious, you know. I wasn't really like, I'm never going to drink again. But I remember trying, sort of like it taught, like in More About Alcoholism. Is it in More About, where it lists all those things that we've tried? Drinking, not drinking, taking a trip, not taking a trip. And I did try those things. You know, I tried to just drink. I tried to just drink. I tried to just not drink. I tried to just smoke weed. I tried to just not smoke weed. I tried to do things, just do the drugs that got out of your system in 72 hours. I tried to just not do. I tried all those things. And I wasn't really that serious about it, and I know that. So, I didn't think I really honestly tried for a long time. And I did. But I think even then I knew that I didn't really have a choice. You know, I think even then, deep down, I knew that if there was alcohol in front of me, if I was going to drink it, and if there were drugs in front of me, I was going to do it. And I would save my drinking, you know, like I would really save my drinking. And here I am, these people are like doing heroin, and they would say, don't give her alcohol. They'd say, don't get stupid, Molly. Don't get stupid. And that was what I would tell myself, don't get stupid. Because my plan was always to get drunk, but it was always to get a little less drunk than I did last time. That was the plan. It was always just to not get quite as drunk as I had, you know. And I would tell myself, I didn't try to limit myself to 2 drinks, but I would try to limit myself to like 8, you know. And I never could do it. And that is what makes me alcoholic. It doesn't matter how much or how little I drank. It doesn't matter how many drugs I did. What matters is that when I pick up that alcohol, I absolutely cannot stop drinking. And that every single time I would get good and drunk, and I would be, you know, wobbly, drunk, and I would tell myself, stop, you're going to get stupid. Remember what happened last time. Remember how you embarrassed yourself. Remember how you threw up in that person's car. Remember how you know, slept with your best friend's husband. Stuff like that is the stuff that I did. And every single time I would say, screw it, and I would drink that. You know, I'd have this much vodka in my glass, and every single time, there is not one time that I don't remember, once I had enough of that alcohol in me, saying, screw it, and just downing it. And that's what alcohol does to me, and that's what makes me an alcoholic. And it took me a long time to understand that, even sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, like years. Anyway, so I'm doing drugs with this guy, and we were both, I had just turned 19, and he was 19, and I woke up one day and he was dead. He had OD'd in the bed next to me. He was 19 years old. His name was Brandon, and he didn't really ever have a chance. You know, he never had a chance to get sober. He didn't have a family that could put him in treatment, and his mom was an alcoholic. You know, his dad really wasn't in the picture, and he never really had a chance to get sober. And after that, that was the first consequence that I had that I couldn't say wasn't a big deal. I mean, it was irreversible, you know. It was done. And I didn't think, oh, I'm going to die, but I thought, oh, I'm going to live. And I wanted to die. Absolutely, you know, I wanted to die. I did not get sober right away. About a month, that was in November of 2004. About a month after that, like late December or early January of 2005, I ended up in treatment in Metairie, which is close to New Orleans. And I didn't want to be there. You know, what happened is at that point, my family was really tired of me, and I had gone to grandma's, I had gone to my uncle's, I had gone to my mom's, I had been at my dad's. You know, I'd gone to all these places. My family, like, had these whole, like, family meetings about what to do with me. And, of course, I didn't know that. we went to family group, we went to like family therapy and stuff like that. And I lied. I wasn't honest about my problem. And I was diagnosed all these other things because my behavior was so insane. I was diagnosed borderline personality disorder. I was diagnosed all bipolar. I had all these other issues, it seemed like. So my mom went to enough Al-Anon meetings that she said, you have until this day to leave my house. And on this day, I will take you to treatment. I'll take you to the shelter, because my mom was taking me to shelters, which I was so mad about. Because here my mom is, she lives in this nice, big, fancy house, and she's taking me to the teen shelter just to let me know where it is. And I had like this, I had friends. I had friends that I did drugs with, and that I drank with, and that had problems, many, many problems themselves. So I thought, I'm going to go to my friend's house on this day. And for whatever reason, I decided to go to this treatment center. And it was an inpatient treatment center. It's called Arno. It's in Metairie. And I didn't want to be there. Of course I got there, and I always thought that if I didn't agree with the rules, that I didn't have to follow them anywhere. It could be a job, it could be at school, it could be, because I'm smarter than that, and they don't apply to me. So naturally, I'm at this treatment center. I get to this treatment center in about January, and my sobriety date isn't until March. So I'm not sober in this treatment center. And, it's really hard to get loaded in a treatment center. And that wasn't the only thing I was doing. This was a co-ed treatment center, so you can imagine what was going on. And of course, I was in the middle of it. I was not the only one, but I was in the middle of it. I met a boy at that treatment center. Anyway, so I got in trouble, and I got suspended. That's what they do. They suspend you. I had to go home. And I was almost, I was about to get kicked out, and I was terrified of being homeless. I knew that I would not make it on the streets. I thought I acted like I was such a badass. I really did. And I would tell you that, but I was terrified, I was terrified of you, and I was absolutely terrified of being on the streets. I knew I wouldn't make it. So at one point, I finally made a decision in this treatment. And they had made me get a sponsor, and I was working their little step worksheets, but my sponsor was also taking me through the book. So I had started, I had this girl that I asked to sponsor me. She was really scary, so I asked her. She had a bunch of tattoos. She looked like a badass, so I asked her to sponsor me. And she was sponsoring me, and I decided, and I don't know what happened. I think that I had manipulated this other guy to, steal some cough medicine from Walgreens, and we took it, I don't know. And I don't know what happened, but I decided that I didn't want to lie anymore. I did not make a decision to get sober. I made a decision to get honest. And I've been sober ever since. I decided that I didn't want to lie. I couldn't lie like that anymore. It was miserable. It was, this person can't talk to this person, and what did I tell this person? I got to make sure these people stay apart. And they were on to me, I'm not a very good liar. They knew at that treatment center that stuff was going on. And at this time, I had started this relationship with this man, and in the treatment center. And I came clean, I came clean. I told them that I wasn't sober, and I told them I had done these things, and I wasn't allowed to see this man and this is my current husband, by the way. Only treatment center story I've ever heard that worked out, but it did. And we couldn't see each other for 2 months straight, while I was finishing now this guy, when I had got to this treatment center, he was the community leader. So I had to I was like, oh, I got to stay away from that guy. Naturally, by the time I graduated, he was banned from Arno campus. Which wasn't all my fault. I mean, he had a part in that too, but anyway. So I made sacrifices. I decided I didn't want to lie, and in order to not lie, my logic was I just had to do what they told me to do. And that is the best advice that you can give, or I can give to any other person in treatment. Do what they tell you to do, because you will not win if you try to fight them. I did not win, and I'm really smart. So I made that decision to stop lying, and I had to do what my sponsor told me to do, and we started working the steps. And I don't know, I think I had worked up until the 5th step, and I had about 5 months sober, and Katrina hit. And so me and this man evacuated with my family, and we came to Jackson. We came to Jackson, which then there was a curve, the power went out and everything here. But they were really nice. They let us have our animals in the hotel, which was really nice because they weren't even like a animal-friendly hotel. Anyway, they were nice. So we evacuated, and then we ended up going back to Nashville. I went to Nashville for a little while at my dad's house. I don't even know what time I started. And I really wanted to drink. And up until that point, I had wanted to use drugs, and I had these like dreams, vivid dreams every night about, doing drugs, and maybe sometimes about drinking. But I still didn't think I was an alcoholic. I did not think I was an alcoholic. I knew that I couldn't drink. I knew that bad things would happen to me if I drank. I knew that if I drank, I would do drugs, but I did not believe that I was truly an alcoholic, at least not like y'all were. So we evacuate, and I want to drink. And I was very surprised by that, because I was an alcoholic. So I was very surprised by that. My parents, were like drinking their little wine because they were wine drinkers, and they drink a glass of wine, and every night with dinner or whatever is what they do. And they were relaxing, relaxing and like trying to like calm down. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was going on. And I realized that A, I wanted to drink, and B, I had been waiting. I didn't even know it, but somewhere in my mind, I was waiting for something bad enough to happen that would give me that rationalization, that justification to take a drink. And this was it. If anything, this was it. This is a huge thing, right? But that realization, to me, was a spiritual experience, that moment of clarity, that ability to see that if I drank, it would only be an excuse, that I actually had a choice not to drink. That was my first spiritual experience, and I would not have described it at the time, because I was still like anti, God and anti-religion. I didn't really know, but I thought I knew. But that was a spiritual experience for me. That was the first real, other than the decision to get honest, that was the first, that was the time that I decided to stay in AA, to stay sober. Now, some people have to absolutely have every drinking idea out of their head before they even come in the room, before they can get a week sober. But that wasn't my experience. That I had about 5 months sober before I even recognized that I had been waiting, that I had been planning my relapse, because everybody relapsed. That's what I thought. Everyone in that treatment center, almost everyone did. But if I drank, it wouldn't be because I had to drink. It would be because I wanted to. And that is a spiritual experience, the fact that I recognized that I had a choice. Up until that point, I didn't really know that I didn't have a choice, but I can remember days waking up and thinking, are you going to do drugs today? And knowing deep down that I was, that I didn't, why even ask myself that question? Because I knew that I was going to. And I still wasn't clear on the alcoholism, and I'll talk about that now. I came back and I got a home group, and I've been sober ever since. Because my sponsor was scary, and she told me to get a home group, so I got a home group. And that led me onto this service path that I'm doing, which I'll talk about a little bit of that too. And but just to talk a little bit about the first step and about our singleness of purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, I went to meetings and I said, I'm Molly, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. And there were meetings where people shut me down. And there was one particular meeting where this woman shut me down. And I got up and I was all belligerent. And somehow, because I also heard things. I heard things in meetings like an alcoholic will steal your money and feel bad about it, and a drug addict will steal your money and then go help you look for it. So I heard things in meetings that and of course I had, that self-righteous anger. That's like my favorite thing, is that self-righteous anger. So I was quick, to find where you were wrong or where you were wronging me. So naturally, there was probably a lot of things that people said that I didn't hear as well. But I did think that, the reason we didn't talk about drugs in AA meetings was because we didn't like drug addicts. So, but what happened was I surrounded myself with these women, or I didn't really know what I was doing, but I ended up surrounding myself with these women who weren't afraid to tell me the truth, who weren't afraid to tell me about singleness of purpose, who weren't afraid to approach me after that meeting and say, let me explain to you why this is. And thank God for that, because I was very, very confused. And my sponsor said to me, when you go to an AA meeting, can you just be an alcoholic? And what a relief that was. What a relief that was, because I felt so different from other people, even in AA, and I was trying to make myself so different, and they say, look for the similarities, not for the differences. But what I like about Singleness of Purpose and Alcoholics Anonymous, and what I try to do and practice in my own home group, is to be flexible enough to allow people to come in and figure out what they are. But also to explain to people, what our Singleness of Purpose is, that we aren't against drug addicts, that we're not against Narcotics Anonymous. In fact, we don't really have an opinion on that at all. But that we do one thing here, and we have one thing in common, and that's the way we drink. Because that is it. That is the only thing we have in common. Because I have a lot of problems that y'all probably don't have, and y'all have a lot of problems that I probably don't have. And I wanted to tell you all about that when I was newly sober. So I needed people to really tell me, to explain to me, to be quiet, to listen, and that I didn't need to be all those things when I was at an AA meeting. And that was really important to me. And I feel like a lot of times people are scared to do that, or they get angry about it, But a lot of times newcomers don't know. They don't know. That treatment center does not teach them how to behave in an AA meeting. That is our job. So thank God for those women who taught me how to behave. And anyway, so I go to this home group, and I'm like, what is a home group? I didn't know what that was. So there's this really cool pamphlet called the AA Home Group, which is like my favorite pamphlet. And of course, then I wanted to know everything about AA. I wanted to be like the expert. I wanted to change everything, because the big book was sexist, and I was going to fix it. And of course, all that stuff was explained to me too, why we don't change that, why all that stuff, luckily I had a sponsor who knew about the traditions, who knew about the pamphlets, who knew about the service manual. And I had this woman that I met who was not my sponsor, but she sort of took me under her wing, and she was sort of like my first service sponsor. And I'm not really friends with this lady today, but I will always be grateful to her because she brought me into service. She, like what Holly said, I love that what she says about investing. She invested time. My sponsors did, of course, too. But she invested a lot of time into me and my husband both and taught us how to be of service and taught us about general service, taught us about group service and about general service in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I got this home group, and I'm like the treasurer of the group, which is really good. And, and then I moved on and did other things. And now I'm the birthday chair in my group now. So I make the cupcakes. And I put we have a bulletin. We have a central office that serves a few of the districts in our area, and they put out a bulletin. And if you have an anniversary, it gets put in there. And we collect birthday contributions. So I'm in charge of collecting the birthday contributions at our group for people that pick up chips of a year or more to send to GSO. So that was really important to me. Now, of course, I had to work. Before I got into all that service stuff, I was working the steps. And I had that spiritual experience. And for a long time, I wouldn't have called it that. And I didn't like the word God. And I didn't like, I don't know where I got that from. I was not raised in some kind of militant religious household. I just thought I was smarter than that. I really did. There were certain things about certain religions that I didn't agree with, that I still don't agree with. But that instead of saying, okay, that works for those people, it doesn't have to be for me, or maybe they don't, they take part of it and that works for them and they don't have to accept everything. That wasn't from, I'm very all or nothing. So it's there's one thing I object to in that religion, it's bad. So, I was really anti-religious and I didn't know, I was taken to church when I was a kid, but we never talked about it. We never talked about it at homes. It was very hush-hush. So, the idea of, praying with another person or in public was very, I didn't want to do that. But I did, even when I was, very against it, we got on our knees and we did the third step prayer. And I was willing, like it says in step 2, I was willing. I was willing to go to any length to stay sober, and I still didn't really know all of what my problem was. But I was willing to do anything because I knew I couldn't drink. And that's all I had to know in the beginning. And I was willing to believe that I didn't have the answers to fix it. And again, that's all I had to know. I didn't have to have a definition of a God. I didn't have to feel anything when I prayed. I still pray a lot today, and I don't necessarily feel anything. I don't walk around connected every minute of the day, but I do it anyway. I stay real close to AA because for me, that is where I get my spirituality. And maybe it'll be different later on in my life, but that's where it is right now. And so I know I have to stay real close to it. But at the time, I was very anti-religious, and I sat in meetings for about 3 years, and was terrified I was going to drink because I didn't think that I had had the kind of spiritual experience that y'all had had. Because I didn't have a burning bush moment. I didn't feel God. I didn't really understand God. And it just took me a long time to be able to find a God that I could do business with, to find something that would work for me other than the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Of course, that did work for me, and that does work. But I thought also that was sort of like taboo, you know, that like you come in and you use the AA group until you find something better. And then maybe that is the experience for a lot of people, but my experience was that really worked for me for a long time, and sometimes it still works for me, because sometimes I do have a hard time praying, sometimes I do have a hard time feeling connected and believing, and sometimes it's really easy, you know? And I know that today that being spiritual doesn't mean that I'm going to feel spiritual all the time. It doesn't mean I'm going to walk around. How I'm feeling and how I'm doing are two different things, and I can be feeling really bad and doing really well, and I can be feeling really well and not doing good at all. And anyway, in the steps, the steps opened up my world, because I figured out how to get along in a world where I can't control things, where not everyone's going to love me. And I know myself today. That's what the steps have given me. Like, I know a little bit about who I am today. I have an identity other than drug addict, other than borderline personality disorder, other than alcoholic. I have an identity today, and I don't have to do all those other things. You know, I don't have to find my identity. I don't have to make myself better than you or worse than you. I can be a worker among workers, you know, and that's something that I've learned in the traditions as well. The traditions apply to my life just as easily as the 12 steps. And I can figure out how to temper that ego so that I can be part of something bigger than me. And that is like what is so important about being in AA and also being of service in AA, because you don't really know, or maybe you do, I don't know. I didn't know how big this program was until I got involved in service, specifically general service. But service in general, you know, I just didn't know. I had no clue. I heard these people talking about all these terms like GSR, DCM, GSO. I had no clue what any of that meant, and I wanted to know, so I found out. I went and I found someone who knew, and I asked them a lot of questions. And I was also that person at the meetings with a lot of questions, bothering the DCM. But that doesn't bother me. I want people to, you know, I'm a DCM, currently serving as a DCM in my district, and I really want people to ask questions. Not that I have all the answers or anything like that, but anyway, I know I'm kind of all over the place, but you know, the steps gave me a way to live in this world. And I try to practice them in all my affairs, and I am absolutely not perfect at it. I sponsor people. I have four. I just picked up a new sponsee, so I have about 4 right now, which is kind of a lot for me. But I have 3 really, really solid girls that I'm working with. And the way that I really figured out that first step was through having sponsors that took me through, but also through sponsoring people. Because I heard their stories, and I had to help them point out where their alcoholism was. I had to say, well, that's what makes you an alcoholic. If you believe what the book says, it's not because of this, it's not because of that, it's because when you drink, you absolutely can't stop. That phenomenon of craving kicks in, you can't stop drinking, and yet you always go back to it. That mental obsession means that you just always go back, you always think it's going to be different, that rationalization that we have. And here's how I had that. So all my experiences have been used to help somebody else. And that's how I know I'm an alcoholic today. And that's, you know, that's really important. Identification is very, very important in our program, as I'm sure all of you guys know. But I like to work with the ones that are really confused, because that's my experience. I like to get the ones that go to the closed meeting and say, I'm so-and-so, I'm a drug addict. Because I go to them after the meeting and I say, this is what an open meeting is, this is what a closed meeting is, you know, and this is why. And do you drink? And you know, half the time they're like, oh yeah, every day. Sometimes they're not, but a lot of the time they are. And I say, well, you know, if you want to go through the book and I can help you figure out what you are, because that's what somebody took the time to do with me. And I love that. I don't always get them like that chance. And I always want the ones that are confused about God too, because that was my experience. But of course they're they're not confused at all. They're like, oh no, I pray every day. I'm really good on it. So anyway, which is good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's a really good thing. But anyway, so, you know, today I think I keep it really simple, and I believe a spiritual experience is, I heard somebody say this in a meeting, and I really like it, that a spiritual experience is anything that I can do today that I could not do when I was drinking. And there's a lot of things that I can do today. Not only can I be of service in Alcoholics Anonymous, I can be of service in my family and at my job, and I have an amazing life today. My husband and I, we get to walk this journey together. We get to do this together, which is usually fun. It's hard to be in the same home group, but we make it work. And that's not for everyone. That's not necessarily a suggestion, but I get to do this with my best friend, and that's really amazing. And I have a life today, and I have a solution. I have a solution to all my problems. I don't have to live in fear every day. And that's really one of the first things that the steps gave me, is that freedom from fear, which was all about me, freedom from having to be number one, freedom from having to be the special one, and freedom from that fear about what everybody else thinks of me. And I don't have to live fear does not run my life today. And the longer I've stayed sober and the more I work the steps, the deeper it gets. And so I learn more about things that aren't so obvious about myself, things that aren't necessarily the fears that are have me react in the most embarrassing ways, because those things we get rid of first, or I did. And now it's more about the things that are really underlying, and I'm sure I'll do many, many more embarrassing things, don't get me wrong, but I get to have that freedom, and I know how to deal with situations that I never could have dealt with before. I know how to deal when my husband isn't acting the way I think he should act, or my mother, or my sister. I have a solution, and I don't know, I think that's a spiritual experience as well. I've had that personality change, the thoughts that, I look back on the behaviors that I had when I was drinking, and I look at some of the wreckage of my past, and I don't really even relate to that person anymore. I know that I could go back there, and I know that it wouldn't be that hard to go back there. But I just can't comprehend how the idea to get in the car with someone that I met in the psych ward and let him take me God knows where, it wouldn't occur to me today as a good idea. Absolutely, absolutely would not. The things that I did back then just don't occur to me. I don't think the same way. I absolutely don't behave the same way, but I don't really think the same way. Now, that doesn't mean that I think perfectly by any means. And new things come up, And God knows it's more embarrassing to have to make amends for shit you did sober than it is sometimes for stuff you did drunk. But anyway, I really enjoy being a DCM in my district. It's teaching me a lot, as my sponsor says, teaching me a lot of patience. And I get really discouraged sometimes when people don't show up because, of course, no one does it the way I would do it. But, and I'm I heard someone say this at a meeting recently, they're like a sheriff of everything. Well, that's new. I wasn't that when I was drinking. But when I'm sober, I can, I'll tell you how to drive, I'll tell you how to do your job, I'll tell you how to do this, I'll tell you how to do that, because you're not doing it right. So that's something I have to work on, and we're about to get together and do some more step work, which is about time for. And anyway, I have a really, really amazing life today. I am pregnant. I'm 5 months pregnant. So don't think I just have a big gut, because I'm in that in-between stage where I think I look really pregnant, but no one can quite tell. So I'm really, really excited about that. I absolutely never imagined my life being this way. I never imagined being married. I never imagined being a mother. I never imagined the house I live in, or the car that I drive, or the fact that me and my mother have a really great relationship today, even though she doesn't do everything the way I think she should. And I'm sure that goes both ways. But, I have this really, really amazing life today. I'm absolutely happy. I have a lot of friends, most of them in AA. And, we've really created something in my district that is really hopefully reaching out to new people and hopefully trying to get them involved in service. There's a lot of people in New Orleans and in the New Orleans area that have a couple years sober and are serving their groups and serving their districts, and it's really amazing to see. So, I don't know, I probably have a lot of other things. I don't know if I'm probably a little early, but that's okay, because I don't really have anything else I need to say. But thank you so much, Amy, and thank you so much, Tom, for asking me to be here, and for the committee. I'm sure it wasn't just Tom's decision, for having us here. This is a great conference, and I'm really excited to be here, and we'll be here for the rest of the week, or weekend. See, I'm going to stop now. That's it.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.